I'm Mikey D, and this is the Delta League Podcast. Delta, the only game in which three teams play at the same time. Welcome to Week 10. And after a week in which Delta lost one of its most beloved players, the action continues. And we'll start out in Los Angeles, where the Fallen Angels take on the Chicago Pride and the Washington Power. And in this one, Los Angeles wins it 35. Washington 18, Chicago 15. LA was late onto the field because somebody put a chair behind their dressing room door. Apparently, it's just a prankster who works there, who's been doing this in the stadium for some time, but this time he went into overdrive and he did it to Washington and Chicago as well. Now, when he starts hitting people with chairs, let me know, because there's a few Delta players who need a blow to the cranium to reset their priorities. Now, Washington captain Frederick Giacalone was late for practice, but he has a valid excuse. It was because he was chasing down a pickpocketer outside the stadium. Word is, he got the purse back. Way to go. Now, the latest contestant in the Delta player Thy Name is Retarded is injured player, gone for the season, Perry Brackett, getting involved with LA player Bobby Sheffitz, and they all got yellow cards. Now, this game was also plagued by a fat female streaker wearing nothing but a purple sash. How do these people get into the games? Delta has to have the most unhinged fan base I've ever seen. Now, Chicago player Finn Wehrle bowed out of this game when he took an accidental elbow from Clark Crapeau, and it cut him bad over the eye, but he should be back after a week. Missing half your roster for an entire season is child's play for this Chicago team. Just keep pouring on the pain. For Los Angeles, leading the way, Frank Viano and Marty Hagar with 6 goals. For Chicago, leading the way is Star Palmer, 8 goals. And for Washington, leading the way, Goldie Crowley with 4 goals. And in the end, Los Angeles gets the 4 points. Washington, 2 points. Chicago, 0. Now, let's move on now to Vancouver, Canada, where the Orcas take on the Boston Revolution and the New York Fire Demons. And in this one, New York wins it 32, Vancouver 20, Boston 14. Although New York won this game, some fans that made the continent-wide trip to Vancouver to see this game threw paper streamers and cups onto the court. If anyone should be upset, it's Boston fans. But don't give them any ideas. They may decide to beat the shit out of some player as they get into their car. Now, Vancouver star player Carol Cavadan is done for the year. She took a bad spill and she broke her femur. She had to be stretchered out of there. The prognosis is, although the break is clean, the recovery time is not instantaneous. She's gone upward of 16 weeks, and her season is finished. So, for Vancouver leading the way, D.D. Christopherson and Ravi Cutter, each with 5 goals. For the Boston Revolution leading the way, Kobe Dominguez with 4 goals. And for New York leading the way, the familiar face, Rhino Montalban, 7 goals. And in the end of this one, New York picks up the 4 points. Vancouver, 2 points. Boston, 0. Now, let's move on to Salt Lake City, where the Sting, they will be hosting the Memphis Pharaohs and the Atlanta Inferno. And in this one, Atlanta wins it 22. Memphis 17. Salt Lake City 16. Now, there were some rumors that the Pharaohs were going to change their colors next year. And given fans' disdain for the burnt orange and blue, these rumors seemed legitimate. Word is they're going to gold, red, and white, which would be a considerable visual upgrade, but Memphis player Neil Conlon, who's been out several weeks with a groin tear, criticized the team for even considering such a thing, saying, "I like the colors. We're playing well. Don't mess with the energy." I don't blame him for this, because some people like hideous color combinations. Also remember that sports athletes tend to be extremely superstitious people. Now, just when you think you've heard the last of Neil Conlon, he appears on Instagram with a racy photo. Now, he came out afterwards saying it was his wife that posted it, and as a result, the photo was not cropped properly, thereby revealing too much ass. The whole ass. Come on, Miss Conlon. Your husband's ass is not community property. Now, Atlanta player Enrique Hubacek got tackled through the scorekeeper's table, and he landed wrong. Really wrong, because his hip is fractured. He's gone for the season and then some. I hope he renews his Netflix subscription, because he's going nowhere for 16 straight weeks. So, for Salt Lake City, leading the way, Captain Alexander Harris with 4 goals. For the Pharaohs, Gerard Sredell with 5 goals, and also William Miller with 5 goals. And for the Inferno, Kane Anselmo with 6 goals. And in the end of this one, Atlanta picks up the 4 points. Memphis, 2 points. Salt Lake City, nothing. Now, let's move on here to Phoenix, where the Rising are playing host to the Seattle Pirates and the Montreal Maelstrom. And in this one, Seattle pulls out a squeaker. Seattle 21, Phoenix 20, Montreal 12. This game was officiated by only one official, because official Pavel Neshevich was arrested. Details to come. Now, scratched Montreal player Angela Carlucci got involved in a scuffle with Seattle star player Evan Parawal, and both of them got the card. And also, Seattle player Emmett Ruin strained his shoulder. He went to the back, but he shouldn't miss any time whatsoever. This Seattle team seems to walk between raindrops. Now, for the Phoenix Rising leading the way, Gabriela Davignon, 6 goals. For the Pirates, it was Tommy Anastos with 4 goals. And for the Montreal Maelstrom, Mr. Kickass, KC Snapper with 3 goals. And in the end of this one, Seattle still picks up the 4 points. Phoenix, 2 points. Montreal, 0. Let's move on now to Dallas, where the Lone Stars are playing host to the Toronto Titans and the Philadelphia Shred. And in this one, the Titans win it. Toronto 32, Dallas 24, Philadelphia 20. This game was delayed because there was a Trump protest, which is rare in Texas because that state tends to be pretty red. But this game got underway 45 minutes late due to the parade of the Never Trumpers. Perpetual pain in the ass. Toronto player Devlin Hannibal came out this week saying he'd like to be traded. I mean, that team is a contender. That team has a chance to win the Wheel of Fire this year. There's at least a dozen teams I think I'd pay money not to be traded there. But he has been shown to be a bit of a head case, so I hope he isn't angry when he ends up in Miami. Just saying. Now, shortly after that, Toronto star player Demetrius Lindbergh got eviscerated for taking a picture at a wax museum with a figure of Donald Trump. I mean, it doesn't take much to dub something controversial. It's not like he dry humped the statue. People are so frickin' stupid. Now, Philadelphia player John Holmes Galuccio got into 2 separate incidents in this game. First with Toronto player Dan Kamen, and second for a pretty rough hit out of bounds on John Sylvester. He came out of it no worse for wear, but restraint is something this guy has a problem with, and as a result, he comes out of this game with 2 yellow cards. And in Delta League math, yellow plus yellow equals black card. See ya later. Now, for Dallas, leading the way, Bernie Tully with 7 goals. For the Toronto Titans, Gord Maurer with 9 goals. And for the Shred, it was again Chip Chiozzi with 7. So, in the end of this one, Toronto gets the 4 points. Dallas, 2 points. Philadelphia, once again, cheesesteak. And let's move on. Mile high, Denver, Colorado, where the Sky. They're playing host to the Detroit Rock and the Miami Vortex. And in this one, Denver pulls out a surprise win here, 26. Detroit 19, Miami 17. Now, this whole game was taken over by Detroit Rock fans. Angry Detroit Rock fans. Drunk Detroit Rock fans. Detroit Rock fans pissed off that they traveled all the way to Denver, finished second to the Sky, and almost lost to Miami as well. That they littered the field with commemorative Poo Poo McCarthy bobbleheads. Those are going to be valuable someday, you jackasses. Now, Detroit player Argenta Mignani came to the court with cornrows in her hair, and people started lighting her up on social media, accusing her of cultural appropriation for sporting a black hairstyle. Now, she just lost it after the game because not only was she pissed at almost losing to Miami and Denver at the same time, she's half black and found the whole thing quite insulting. So she's wearing the hairstyle next week, and if they have a problem with it, she'll meet them in the parking lot after the game. Don't ever recommend that to Boston fans. They may take you up on that offer. Now, In news that includes action on the court, Detroit player Isaac Parker Johnson got caught breaking one of those sentences in the rule book that says no headshots. So, Mr. Blackball says your history. In Denver Skyland, fans are demanding that player Knox Schreiber be traded. Wasn't it last week when fans tried to unsuccessfully buy the team from owner Rick Salmon? Put down the hash pipe. You're not the GM of the team. So, for the Denver Sky, it was Larry McMaster leading the way with 6 goals. For the Detroit Rock, it was Jack Ith with 6 goals. And for the Vortex, it was Dev Diwali with 4 goals. And in the end of this one, it is Denver picking up their first win of the season and 4 points. Detroit, which seems for the 100th time this year, picks up the 2 points. And Miami, very familiar territory, 0. Now, let's take a look at the standings. In first place, with an 8-point lead, Seattle, 36 points. Next up, a bit of a logjam here. New York, Vancouver, and Memphis with 28 points each. Then Toronto, 27 points. Phoenix, 24 points. Dallas, 23 points. Atlanta, 22 points. Montreal, 19 points. And the playoff line is drawn there. Close behind, we have Chicago and Los Angeles with 18 points, followed by Detroit, 16 points, Washington, 15 points, Salt Lake City, Philadelphia, Boston, 14 points each, Denver, 11 points, and Miami, 5 points. Now, on to the scoring lead. It is Evan Perawal with Seattle, 51 goals. Then Vladimir Millet, Seattle, 50 goals. Then 10 points behind, Laurie Moss from Seattle, Nan Freeling from Phoenix, Royno Montalban from New York, 41 goals each. Then Stefan Greiss from Montreal, 40 goals. Then Chip Chiozzi from Philadelphia, 39 goals. Then Nathaniel Mansfield from Dallas, 37 goals. Then Travis Valencia, Toronto. Lyles Houston, Toronto. Demetrius Lindbergh, Toronto. Angela Carlucci, Montreal, 36 goals each. Now, let's move on to the league news before we hit the mailbag. It appears that Delta League official Pavel Neshevich was arrested so close to game time that a replacement referee could not be found. Word is he was selling counterfeit league merchandise on the side. That's a no-no. Now, the Salt Lake City Stadium repairs have been completed. The burnt seating was gutted, and there is now temporary seating in place, so now the Swarm can return to the Hive. Now, in 2 weeks' time, the Inferno will get their first home date since the death of Bello Hess. And it is not a secret that they will raise his number 3 to the rafters that night. It looks to be a very emotional night for the city of Atlanta. And just a reminder that in 2 weeks, we hit the final trade deadline before the playoff push. And there's going to be some big names moving because of the number of players demanding trades. It's going to be a fun week, I'll tell you that. Now, there are going to be some changes to the trade deadlines themselves, as well as the waiver wire as it applies to next season, but I will cover that next week. So, let's move on to the mailbag. And Matty V. I have no idea what the league was thinking by going forward with regularly scheduled games last week. The optics look extremely bad, totally tone deaf. I don't understand it. Now, I agree with you. In retrospect, the games should have been pushed back 1 week. All I know is it was a league decision and not a decision by the individual clubs themselves, who obviously wanted nothing to do with any physical competition last week. But the league had some kind of scheduling conflict with the games, having to go 1 week later, and it would apparently jeopardize the schedule going forward. I call bullshit here. The optics look very bad, almost apathetic. So you bet your ass they will not do this again. Perception is reality. Now, real TJ, what is going on with all these officials getting arrested? Doesn't the league do background checks? The refs are bigger assholes than the fans. Too funny. But it's not funny. It's actually pretty serious. I mean, we got one official investigated for foul play because his wife was found dead in his home. It does not look good for him. Now, last week, official Nick Apolito was arrested for a road rage incident where he flashed a Desert Eagle. And this week, Pavel Neshevich selling counterfeit league merchandise. We've got some cool pieces of work here. Rest assured that it's not the first time someone in the league has committed a felony. But the hits just keep on coming. So take your exam, submit your name. Like to see you do the same job without committing vehicular homicide or homicide proper. Now, on to @Real Piero Barone. Last week, I totally called that Miami win, and this week, I'm going to nail a 6-week game trifecta and put my kids through college. This guy is the greatest. I don't think anyone has nailed a 6-team superfecta in Delta League. It's just way too many variables to consider. At least I know who to come to when I need a loan. Now, Steiner Recliner. What is the progress with the Delta League cheerleaders calendar? Pharaoh Hose Smokin'. The answer is, it is coming at the end of this year. Those who are apparently in high demand, so wait with bated breath, and eventually it will show up in your mailbox so you can stroke away all your stress. Now, let's move on to next week's games and predictions. We'll start in Boston, where the Revolution play host to the Atlanta Inferno and the LA Fallen Angels. And the determining factor in who wins this game is how the Inferno fare 2 weeks after losing Bello Hess in a tragic boating accident. Now, Boston has been a pushover for literally the entire year, and recently LA has bounced back to life following a horrible string of games to start the year. So I'm going to take LA to continue the roll. Now, on to Memphis, where the Pharaohs are playing host to the Detroit Rock and the Vancouver Orcas. And Detroit has had a terrible string of luck, and at just the worst time possible. This week they face a Vancouver team that is a top-tier powerhouse, and Memphis, who is proving the naysayers wrong because they just continue to win. Now, Vancouver has shown a proclivity to bow to superior opponents, so I'm taking Memphis to take the 4 points here. Now, on to Dallas, where the Lone Stars are playing host to the Miami Vortex and the Salt Lake City Sting. Now, fate keeps giving Miami chances to pick up a win, but they just can't seem to deliver the goods. This week, Dallas looks hobbled. They can't afford to play so inconsistently against beatable opponents. Salt Lake City plays the spoiler here. Now, off to TO. The Toronto Titans play host to the New York Fire Demons and the Phoenix Rising. And New York had a really good bounce back from a terrible skid. But somehow, they're right back at the top of the standings. Toronto gained 2 points on the Pirates last week, but they're going to need more weeks like that if they want to win the Premiership Shield. And let's be honest, Seattle is showing no quarter. Toronto will have to be impeccable down the stretch, and I don't think they're made of that kind of stuff. Phoenix played well last week, so this matchup looks to be the most intriguing game of the week. Toronto has not come out on top against any of the top teams this year, so I'm taking New York to keep pace and Toronto to drop down again. Now, on to Chicago, where the Pride will taking on the Montreal Maelstrom and the Seattle Pirates. And last week, Seattle had the misfortune of finishing second. But this week, they face a depleted Chicago squad and an inconsistent Montreal team that sunk to new lows last week. So Seattle wins big. Now, lastly, on to the nation's capital, Washington Power. They will play host to the Philadelphia Shred and the Denver Sky. And Washington have been very underwhelming. And Philly has been a real bust since the Griffin Bricker trade. That leaves Denver, who picked up their first win of the year last week. I cannot see the Sky having 2 good games in a row. Consistency is what separates the good teams from the bad teams, and Denver is bad. So I'm taking the Power. That's it for this week in the Delta League podcast. Tune in to next week, where the action continues and never stops. See ya.